HOA Karen calls 911. When I build a fence around my farm, then gets arrested. Part 1. The fence that started a war. The red and blue lights flickered across my brand new fence. I was still gripping the hammer, the final post barely in the ground, when the cruiser came to a slow, deliberate stop. 2 officers stepped out. One scanned the quiet farmland behind me. The other glanced toward the woman screeching on the other side of the fence. "That man has illegally fenced off community property," she shrieked, pointing at me like she'd just unmasked a criminal kingpin. One of the officers tilted his head. "Ma'am, are you aware you're standing in a carrot field?" She blinked, confused. I leaned casually on the fence post and let out a breath. She called 911 because I built a fence on my own farm to keep her out. The younger officer let out a laugh, couldn't help himself. Well, this just made my whole week. Just 2 days earlier, this land had been quiet, peaceful, mine, my grandfather's old farm, finally handed down to me after years of waiting. And now, I was free to run it the way he always dreamed. Simple, honest work on honest land. The first thing on my list? A real fence. Not just for looks, but to keep out the deer, the stray dogs, and the occasional nosy neighbor who treated my fields like a public walking trail. I never thought it'd be controversial, certainly never imagined it would start a war. But that was before Karen. The moment I drove the first post into the ground, I heard it. "Excuse me." That voice, sharp, shrill, unmistakable. I turned around slowly, and there she was, Karen. Tight polo shirt, sunglasses perched like a crown of judgment. Clipboard in hand, of course. I'd seen her before, prowling the edges of the neighborhood, barking orders at landscapers, and counting how many inches someone's hedge had grown. This was her kingdom, they said. Apparently, I'd just disturbed the balance. "I'm putting up a fence," I said plainly, already sensing where this was going. She let out a laugh. But not the funny kind. It was more like a scoff, laced with disbelief. "You can't just build something without submitting plans to the HOA Architectural Committee?" she snapped. I blinked. "There is no HOA here. This is agricultural land, zoned rural, not residential." She curled her lip, like she'd just tasted something sour. "Well, maybe it's not technically part of the HOA, she huffed, "but it affects the view from my home. I see this land every day from my yoga deck." I just stared at her, wondering if she was serious. She was. She actually tried to claim visual pollution as a reason I couldn't put up a fence. I explained, again, calmly, that she had no authority here, no bylaws, no jurisdiction, nothing. She didn't like that answer. Not one bit. She turned on her heel, muttering about filing a complaint with the county and documenting the damage to community cohesion. Whatever that meant. I figured that would be it. She'd blow off some steam, rant to her book club, and move on. I was wrong. She came back the next day, this time armed. Bright red flyers, bold black letters screaming illegal construction in progress. She taped them to my fence posts, my mailbox, even tried to hand one to my goat. He ate it. I tore the rest down, shaking my head. She wasn't just upset. She declared a personal, holy war against a wall of wood and wire. But she was only just getting started, and she had no idea what she was walking into. Not yet. Not even close. Part 2. The day Karen got cuffed. I was tightening tension wire on the west side of the property, sweat dripping, hands dirty, mind calm. And that's when I heard it. Tires, gravel crunching. I looked up and saw a sheriff's cruiser slowly rolling down the road toward my gate. Was I worried? Not even a little. I had every permit, every receipt. I'd done it all by the book, but just as the car came to a stop, Karen came flying out of her driveway like a deranged jack-in-the-box, heels clacking like gunshots against the pavement. There he is!" she shrieked, pointing like she'd spotted a fugitive. "He's defying official orders. He's threatening neighborhood unity." Neighborhood unity? Over a fence? The officer stepped out of the cruiser with the kind of patience only someone used to HOA complaints could muster. He looked at me, then at her. "What's going on here?" I handed him my paperwork. Smooth, professional, everything in order. "Karen?" She shoved one of her ridiculous red flyers in his face like it was a search warrant. "This man is violating HOA regulations," she barked. The officer raised an eyebrow, then looked down at the carrots growing beneath his boot. "Ma'am, this isn't an HOA lot," her voice pitched up an octave. "But it should be. We've always treated this land like part of the community." The officer tilted his head. "Ma'am, you're standing in his vegetable patch." That stopped her, just for a moment. Then, boom. "This is outrageous," she exploded. "He's building a fortress. He's hiding something, probably growing illegal plants." The officer had heard enough. He politely asked her to leave the property. She refused. "I have authority," she declared, chin raised high. "Granted by the HOA charter." The cop stifled a laugh. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you again." She folded her arms, stayed put, like she thought she was untouchable. "So," he placed her in handcuffs. "And yes, I'll admit, I was stunned." She screamed like she'd just been thrown into a pit of snakes. Something about suing the county, calling the mayor, invoking her rights as a neighborhood guardian. But the law? The law was clear. She had crossed the line, both literally and metaphorically. The deputy radioed in the charges: trespassing, harassment, disturbing the peace. I leaned on the fence post, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and watched her get driven away, still shrieking out the window like a cartoon villain. And the best part? She still had that stupid flyer in her hand. It flapped out the window like a flag of surrender. Now look, I'm not naive. I knew this wasn't over. People like Karen, they don't back down easy. But something had changed. Someone finally told her no, and made it stick. My fence stood tall behind me, unshaken. But more than that, it had become a line in the dirt, a boundary, not just for deer or stray dogs, but for entitlement, delusion, control. I didn't know how far Karen would go next, but I was ready. Because now, I had more than just fences. I had the law on my side, and a goat who could eat her flyers. Part 3. Karen's flyers and the fence that fought back. I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen would cool off after getting cuffed in her own neighborhood. But no, that would have required shame or self-awareness. Instead, I woke up the next morning to find my fence, plastered, a dozen laminated flyers, stapled across every post, gate, and rail, bright red, bold letters, loud accusations. Community alert! Illegal fencing continues. And right underneath, my full name, printed in size 48 font, like I was some kind of wanted criminal. There were fake quotes from non-existent bylaws, a blurry photo of me holding a hammer. And one flyer, I kid you not, taped to my goat's shelter. He ate it. I swear. I've never been prouder, but this wasn't just petty anymore. It was personal. She was trying to turn the neighborhood against me, spinning up drama like a suburban tabloid machine. And it worked. For a moment. At the local store, I caught whispers. People side-eyeing me like I was building a missile silo instead of a fence. One guy even asked if I'd consider negotiating with Karen. as if this was some kind of hostage situation. I explained, again, this wasn't an HOA matter. This was my land, my fence, my right. But Karen, she had mobilized. An army of clipboard loyalists had started circling, all convinced this was some grand offense against their precious community aesthetic. Then came the kicker, an emergency HOA meeting. The invite claimed it was to discuss rising tensions between members. I showed up, mostly out of curiosity, and maybe just a little spite. The clubhouse looked more like a courtroom than a neighborhood meeting. Karen, out on bail, sat up front like some dethroned queen, wearing a neck brace that she absolutely didn't need. She had notes, diagrams, even a full-on PowerPoint titled The Fence Menace. I'm not joking. She started with old photos of people walking through my farm. Kids, joggers, someone pushing a stroller. All trespassing. But in her version, they were enjoying a heritage footpath. Then she pulled out a map, complete with a dotted line right through the middle of my land, labeled Community Shortcut Access. I raised my hand. That path never legally existed, I said calmly. You all just started using it without asking. Karen clutched her neck brace like I'd insulted her ancestors. Gasps echoed. Chairs shifted awkwardly. One board member, a younger guy who clearly had no time for drama, asked her for documentation. She fumbled. There wasn't any. Just years of entitled assumptions, and a fantasy that the neighborhood owned whatever it looked at. Still, the board didn't shut her down. One elderly man even suggested a compromise. He actually said, maybe you could remove the fence, just on the east side. You know, for community access? I almost laughed. You want me to tear down my fence so Karen can walk her dog through my carrot patch again? Silence. Karen stood up, flustered. He's being difficult on purpose. He's disrupting the peaceful flow of our community. She looked around, desperate for validation. Some nodded. Most stayed silent. The meeting ended with no resolution. But the message was clear. Karen wasn't finished. Not even close. Part 4. The Blueprint Ambush. A few days later, I came home from the hardware store and saw two strangers on my land. Not visitors, not delivery guys. They were tugging at my fence posts, trying to pry them out of the ground. One of them held a rolled-up blueprint. The other, a vest labeled HOA Maintenance. I didn't yell, didn't panic. I just walked over, phone in hand, already filming. Can I help you? They froze, like raccoons caught under a porch light. Then one of them cleared his throat and said, We're here to enforce HOA Directive 17B, fence modification for community access. I blinked, then laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Directive 17B, I said, still chuckling, is about mailbox colors. And this land isn't under HOA jurisdiction. They looked at each other. That's when it hit them. They'd been duped, fed a bunch of Karen-flavored nonsense. I called the sheriff immediately, and right on cue, Karen showed up, like clockwork, storming onto the property, waving papers in the air, shrieking, "Civil duty! Emergency easement rights! He's violating neighborhood unity! The workers?" They quietly packed up and got out of there before the deputy even arrived. But Karen, oh, she doubled down. She demanded the officers cite me for obstruction. They didn't. She demanded I be arrested for blocking a spiritual pathway. They laughed. Then came a monologue about historic foot traffic, ancient energy lines, and how my fence was disrupting sacred view corridors. At one point, she actually accused my goat of being a surveillance asset. The deputy? He handed her another formal warning and told her, "Ma'am, do not set foot on this property again." She called him a fascist. He shook his head and drove off without another word. That night, I reinforced the fence. Tighter wires, stronger posts, cameras, motion-triggered lights, the works. I wasn't just defending property anymore. I was defending peace. But I wasn't alone. The very next morning, a knock at my door. It was a neighbor, 3 houses down. He came with a box of pastries and a sheepish smile. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Karen's been canvassing the block, asking people to sign a petition." My eyebrows raised. "A petition? For what?" "To declare eminent domain on a slice of your land." I nearly dropped my cinnamon roll. "She's offering HOA fee discounts," he added, "trying to bribe people into helping her seize your fence, like this is the Queen's land or something." I was stunned, but not surprised. It was classic Karen. I thanked him, and that's when he said something I didn't expect. "If you need help reinforcing the fence, I'm in." And just like that, the tide started to turn. Karen might have had a clipboard, but I had the community. Not all of them, sure, but enough. Enough to know I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Part 5. Karen's legal circus, the next day. A plain white envelope appeared at my gate. No stamp, no address, just a thick red wax seal, pressed with what looked like an HOA crest. You'd think I was being summoned to Hogwarts. I opened it slowly. Inside, a single-page letter, written in Comic Sans, titled, "Cease and Desist, Fence Violation of Communal Easement Tradition and Karmic Energy Flow." I read it twice. No lawyer's name, no official signatures, just Karen in loopy cursive, with a smiley face. I added it to my growing folder, now labeled The Karen Chronicles. But she wasn't done. Number that would have been too easy. 2 days later, I got a call from the county zoning office. The guy on the line, failing to hold in laughter. "Hey, we received a complaint about your farm," he said. "She says you're building a paramilitary structure disguised as a fence." I blinked. "She attached photos of your goat," he continued, chuckling, "and claims he's part of a defensive livestock strategy." I nearly dropped the phone. The county cleared me in under 10 minutes. No violations, no follow-up, just a final quote from the official as he hung up. "I'm going to go feed my chickens now. Thanks for the entertainment." But I knew it. Karen wasn't just trying to get me fined. She was trying to wear me down. Every absurd move, every fake flyer, phony rule, or HOA cosplay letter, it wasn't just petty, it was strategic chaos. And then, it escalated. Midnight. The cameras I'd installed blinked to life, motion detected. I rubbed my eyes, leaned in. And there she was. Karen. HOA Queen. Neighborhood menace. Now apparently, a moonlight fence assassin. All black clothing, duffel bag in hand, creeping along the east side of the fence like some kind of HOA ninja. She crouched, pulled out bolt cutters. Snip. One tension wire dropped. She moved to the next. I watched, stunned, then amused. Every step, every snap, every dramatic stomp of her orthopedic sneakers caught on 3 cameras, crystal clear. She worked for almost 20 minutes, and then something spooked her. Maybe it was an owl. Maybe it was the guilt catching up to her. Either way, she bolted. Literally. Darted back toward her house, but not before leaving behind her duffel bag. Half-zipped. Right beside the broken fence. I uploaded the footage, called the sheriff. He showed up the next morning, took one look at the bag and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Inside, zip ties, a forged HOA work order, hand-drawn construction notices, and a printed permit with Karen's name written in glitter pen. It was so over the top, it would have been hilarious if it wasn't criminal. The arrest was swift. She tried to slam the door, claimed diplomatic immunity. But they cuffed her right there on the porch. Half the neighborhood saw it. A jogger even clapped. Karen was charged with trespassing, criminal mischief, attempted vandalism, and possession of forged documents. The neighborhood WhatsApp exploded. Someone made a meme. Someone else made a remix of her being startled by the deputy's flashlight. It went viral. Karen versus the fence. But me? I just sat on the porch that night, goat by my side, and whispered into the breeze. That's one bold line. You'll never cross again. Part 6. Karen goes viral and full delusional. I thought maybe this was it, that after being cuffed on her own porch, Karen would finally retreat. But no, this wasn't her ending. This was just the trailer. Because 3 days after her arrest, Karen returned, not with lawyers, but with a webcam and a neck brace and sunglasses, indoors. She uploaded a 15-minute official statement to her community Facebook page, titled, "I kid you not, the fence fraud, a community betrayal." The first 10 seconds, her dramatically adjusting the neck brace. "I've been targeted," she said, voice trembling. "Persecuted for defending neighborhood values." She went on to accuse me of weaponizing goats, running a covert farm militia, and trapping her with psychological fencing. I almost dropped my coffee. She claimed the fence was designed not for agriculture, but to divide the soul of the neighborhood. She showed blurry photos of the goat, called him the beast of manipulation. I replayed that part, twice. Someone in the comments asked if she was okay. She blocked them, but it didn't stop there. The internet did what the internet does best. They remixed it. A local teenager turned her rant into an auto-tuned anthem titled Karen versus the Fence, Neck Brace Edition. The video blew up. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. Memes poured in like rain. Screenshots of her rant captioned, "When HOA power goes unchecked." One clip of her yelling, "He weaponized a GOAT," was turned into a ringtone. I should have been furious. But honestly, I was entertained. Every bizarre attempt she made to flip the narrative only strengthened mine. More neighbors began speaking out. Turns out, Karen had been threatening elderly couples with invisible fines, demanding people repaint their garage doors, warning kids their trampolines violated airspace harmony. She hadn't just been targeting me, she'd been terrorizing the whole block. And now? Her spotlight was melting her. I filed a formal civil suit, property damage, harassment, forged documents, the works. Her defense? Emotional distress. Her lawyer claimed the fence traumatized her. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying a wooden fence traumatized you?" She tried to answer with a monologue. Something about underground tunnels, surveillance goats. Yes. She brought up the goat. Again. The judge looked at me, then back at her, and simply said, "We'll proceed with a hearing." Karen stormed out, muttering about affidavits, counterclaims, and the rise of rogue agriculture. But I wasn't worried, because I had more than documents. I had patience, and something Karen never expected. A neighborhood that finally said, enough. Part 7. The Fall of the Clipboard Queen. There was no dramatic speech, no farewell parade, no HOA-themed cake with passive-aggressive frosting, just a quiet little email from the new acting president of the HOA. Subject line? Board update, Karen Delaney resigns. That was it. No apology, no explanation, not even a thank you for your service. Karen, the self-declared queen of order, was gone. I stared at the screen for a full minute. The woman who once cited me for decorative gnome interference had finally stepped down. It felt surreal. The neighborhood changed overnight. People actually came outside. Kids rode scooters down the sidewalks like they'd just been freed from prison. One guy mowed his lawn with music blasting, without a single warning note taped to his door. It was like spring had come early, and no one was afraid of clipboards anymore. I didn't throw a party, didn't post about it. I just sat on the porch. Max curled at my feet, and for the first time in months, I listened. Silence, peace. No yelling about mailbox colors, no flyers threatening violation hearings. Just wind, bird song, and the soft splash of koi in the pond. But with Karen, peace never lasts, because exactly 1 week later, she reappeared. Not in person, in print, a red flyer, taped to my new fence post, titled Community Healing Picnic. I nearly dropped my coffee. It was her last move, her Hail Mary. The flyer promised free food, reconciliation, and a return to unity. I showed up. Out of curiosity. Only 7 people were there, all awkwardly circling the grill like it might explode. Karen stood at the front, wearing oversized sunglasses and an I Heart HOA apron. She gave a speech, or tried to. But halfway through, a kid yelled, "Bring back the fence guy!" The crowd snorted. Karen scowled. Then the grill flared up, nearly torched her apron. People laughed, and slowly started leaving. By the end, it was just Karen, and a tray of untouched veggie burgers. That was the moment she knew. The clipboard had lost its magic. A few days later, her house was listed for sale. The photos were clearly old. No hint of the overgrown yard or the HOA violation graveyard on her porch. She packed up quietly. No tearful goodbyes, no farewell email, just a moving truck, and one final box labeled HOA Do Not Forget. A neighbor handed it to me after it fell off the truck. Inside? Dozens of unused flyers, and a single untouched HOA handbook. I used it to light a small bonfire that night. Max watched calmly. The koi splashed nearby, and the fence, it stood tall, like a monument to patience and petty victory. Karen was gone, but her reign would forever be remembered, not in fear, but in memes. And oh, we weren't done with those yet. Part 8, Legacy of the Fence and the Rise of the Goat. After Karen moved out, something shifted. It wasn't just peace. It was pride. That fence, once a line drawn in defiance, had become a symbol. Neighbors would slow down just to admire it. Joggers stopped for selfies. One teenager even brought a paintbrush and added a tiny mural of my goat wearing sunglasses. I didn't mind, because what started as a battle line had become a monument. They started calling it the Great Wall of Sanity. And the goat? Oh, the goat was no longer just a goat. He was a legend. It started as a joke. Someone printed a t-shirt with his face on it that read, "Fear the goat, respect the fence." Then kids started visiting just to feed him carrots. Someone even made a plush toy. Before long, he wasn't just a farm animal. He was the unofficial mascot of HOA resistance. Then came the mural. A local artist offered to paint the inside of the fence with a peaceful countryside scene. Rolling hills, sunflowers, koi fish, and dead center, my goat, wearing aviators, standing triumphantly on a fence post. They added a caption beneath it, "The goat who guarded peace." I swear I saw Max, my dog, side-eye the goat in pure jealousy. Even the HOA, now under actual sane leadership, embraced the change. The new president, Helen, showed up one afternoon with a letter and a smile. "Think you'd be willing to host a community day out here?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean, like a fall festival?" She nodded. "But this time, no clipboards, just cider, games, and goats." How could I say no? We called it Fence Fest. There were pumpkin tosses, food stalls, a petting zoo, and of course, a selfie station with the mural. Kids lined up for goat hugs. Someone dressed up as Karen, clipboard, sunglasses, and all, for a dunk tank. Even the sheriff stopped by, handed me a caramel apple, and said, "You know you started a movement, right?" I smiled and glanced over at the fence. I didn't mean to, but I'm glad I did. Because that wall, it wasn't just wood and nails. It was a reminder that standing your ground, even when you're the only one holding the hammer, matters. And sometimes, it only takes a stubborn farmer, a tired goat, and a ridiculous amount of flyers to change a neighborhood forever. Part 9. Courtroom Showdown. Karen's Final Collapse. The courtroom was small, but the tension? Massive. I showed up with a thick folder in my hand, calm, collected. "Karen? 15 minutes late." She stormed in, leopard print bag flailing, papers spilling out like she'd wrestled a tornado on the way. Her lawyer looked like he'd rather be getting a root canal. And me? I just sat there, waiting. The judge called the session to order. This was it. Civil court. My case against Karen. Property damage, harassment, defamation, legal fees. Karen's defense? A neck brace, a dramatic sigh, and a wild stack of emotional appeals tied together by one thing: her undying belief that my fence was a threat to humanity. She stood up with the flair of a B-list soap actress and proclaimed, "Your Honor, this fence has psychologically wounded me and severed the spiritual flow of our community." The judge blinked. I didn't say a word. Instead, I let the evidence speak. Photos of the fence, before and after her sabotage, security footage, clear as day. Official police reports, quotes from the flyers she distributed, and, of course, the infamous bolt cutter video. The judge leaned forward. "Ma'am, are you saying the fence traumatized you?" Karen launched into another monologue. This one involved surveillance goats, zoning conspiracies, and something about underground tunnels. The courtroom was dead silent, until the judge looked at her, sighed, and said, "Miss Delaney, please sit down." It was over. Verdict. Karen was ordered to pay for the fence repairs, cover my legal fees, and granted me a 100-foot restraining order. When she objected, loudly, claiming I was weaponizing agriculture, the judge simply tapped his gavel and said, "Court adjourned." As I walked out, Karen was slumped on a bench in the hallway, neck brace askew, mumbling something about constitutional violations and the goat uprising. I didn't say a word, didn't need to, because this time, the law had spoken, and for once, it didn't side with the clipboard. Part 10. Peace Pastries and Post-Karen Paradise. The sun rose warmer the next morning, or maybe it just felt that way, without the weight of Karen's chaos pressing down on the neighborhood. No more flyers. No more HOA threats written in Comic Sans. No more neck brace cameos on homemade live stream rants. Just quiet. And the distant sound of my goat happily munching grass like he'd won a war. Which, honestly, he kind of had. That weekend, I decided it was time. Time to finally celebrate. Not a big, flashy event. No parade, no HOA speeches. Just a backyard gathering for the people who mattered, the neighbors who stood by me, the ones who saw through the nonsense, the ones who brought donuts instead of citations. We grilled corn. We shared drinks. We laughed about the most ridiculous moments of the Karen saga. At one point, someone placed a tiny paper crown on my goat's head. He stood there, proud, majestic, completely unaware, as the unofficial king of neighborhood sanity. That was when a knock came at the gate. It was Helen, the new HOA president, And she wasn't holding a clipboard. She was holding a gift basket. Inside, fresh fruit, homemade bread, and a formal letter of apology. "I know this doesn't undo what happened," she said softly, "but we're doing a full bylaw review. No more rogue actions, no more fake flyers, and absolutely no more Karens in charge." I smiled, and for the first time in what felt like years, I meant it. Then she added, almost sheepishly, "This place, your farm, it could be something really special. If you ever feel like hosting a fall festival or seed exchange, we'd be honored." I didn't say no. Didn't say yes either. Just smiled. Because for once, I had options again. Karen's house? Up for sale? The listing used old photos from years ago. Not a single image showed the wilted lawn or the cracked shutters. No mention of the clipboard-shaped shadow that used to loom over the entire block. When the moving truck finally arrived, it came and went in one afternoon. Quiet. No farewell. No HOA salute. No final speech from the dethroned queen. Just one cardboard box that accidentally cracked open in the road, spilling a stack of unused HOA violation flyers. A neighbor scooped them up, handed them to me like a trophy. That night, I used them to start a small bonfire. The flames danced high. The air was still, and for the first time in months, I felt it. Not just relief. Resolution. The goat bleated beside me, like a final mic drop. Part 11. The Legacy of the Fence. At first, it was just a few curious glances. A couple of neighbors strolling by, slowing their steps to admire the woodwork. One kid even gave the fence a thumbs up and said, "This is the coolest war memorial I've ever seen." I laughed. But something about that stuck with me. Because somehow, it kind of was. What started as just a practical structure to keep deer out and protect my carrots had become a symbol, a line in the sand, a wall between reason and ridiculousness, a monument to the fact that sometimes sanity needs a perimeter. Then came the TikToks. Local teens started a trend called #FenceCheck, reenacting Karen's meltdown in dramatic slow motion. One even dressed up as her, neck brace and all, sobbing next to a fake clipboard while my goat looked on in the background, unimpressed. It went viral, and suddenly, my little corner of suburbia had become famous. I never asked for that, but honestly, it was kind of fun. People started leaving little notes tucked into the fence rails. "Thanks for standing up to nonsense. Reminds me of my HOA battle in Ohio. Respect. Fear the goat." One neighbor, a retired woodworker, built a custom wooden sign and nailed it proudly to the fence. "The Great Wall of Sanity." Established during the reign of Karen, 2025, I didn't stop him. In fact, I bought solar-powered spotlights to shine on it at night. It felt earned. Then came the unexpected. An email from a local gardening club. Would I be open to hosting their seed exchange next spring? And another from a community theater group. Could they take photos near the Karen fence for their HOA-themed parody play? Even the new HOA board floated an idea. What if we used the farm for an annual Neighbors' Day festival? The old me might have said no. But this wasn't the same farm anymore. This land had been defended, ridiculed, mocked, and nearly bulldozed. And it still stood. So I said yes, but only under one condition. No clipboards allowed. We all laughed. Even the goat, now fully aware of his local celebrity status, let out a triumphant bleat. By the end of the month, my fence wasn't just standing tall. It was standing for something. And Karen? Well, she was long gone. But the story she left behind, that was carved into every nail, every post, every panel of the fence she tried to destroy. This wasn't just a fence anymore. It was the neighborhood's line in the sand, and we had all chosen the right side of it. Part 12. The Goat, the Gavel, and the Golden Hour. The courthouse wasn't crowded. Just a handful of neighbors, some curious reporters, and Karen, sitting stiffly at the front, in full drama mode. Neck brace, on, sunglasses, indoors, clipboard, somehow still clutched like a security blanket. The judge entered, calm, unimpressed, and when he looked at me, I simply nodded. I had nothing to hide. I brought the receipts, the photos, the footage, the police reports, even the HOA bylaws, highlighted, tabbed, and indexed. Karen, on the other hand, she brought a binder labeled Community Integrity Dossier. Inside, printouts of my fence, zoomed-in screenshots of my goat, and a hand-drawn map claiming sacred HOA sightlines violated. She rambled about property values, neighborhood energy, and, at one point, I swear, she said, "This farmer weaponized tranquility." Even the judge blinked slowly at that. When it was my turn, I didn't speak for long. I let the evidence speak for itself. The videos, the bolt cutters, the flyers, the goat shelter with Karen's warning taped to it like it was a military bunker. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even Karen didn't interrupt, and when the judge finally gave his ruling, he didn't raise his voice. He just spoke, clearly, deliberately, like dropping a gavel on absurdity itself. Karen Delaney, this court finds you responsible for trespassing, attempted vandalism, harassment, and filing fraudulent complaints. You are ordered to pay all damages, legal fees, and to stay 100 feet away from the plaintiff's property, including the goat. Karen gasped. Dramatically, of course. But the rest of us? We just breathed out. Because justice had finally arrived. Outside the courthouse, I was met with quiet applause. A few neighbors, the sheriff, even the local news anchor trying to hide a grin. And then, something happened that nearly broke me. A little girl, no more than 7, stepped forward. She was holding her mom's hand, clutching a folded piece of paper. "Is this your goat?" she asked, shyly. I nodded. She unfolded the drawing. A crayon sketch of my goat wearing a tiny superhero cape and standing in front of the fence. She whispered, "Thanks for saving the neighborhood." And then, she hugged me. Tight. No clipboard. No complaints. Just kindness. The kind that reminded me why I fought so hard in the first place. That night, back at the farm, the air felt different. Max lay on the porch. The fence caught the last golden rays of sunset. And the goat, now decorated with a new collar and a tiny medal someone had dropped off, stood proud. Not just a goat anymore, a legend. The wind rustled the leaves, the koi pond glistened, and for once, every voice was quiet. Because Karen's chaos had passed. And in its place, peace. Real. Earned. Permanent. Part 13. The fence that changed everything. The days after the verdict, they didn't feel like a victory lap. They felt like spring, like something in the air had finally shifted. Lighter, quieter, free. Karen was gone. Her flyers? Gone. Her clipboard? Retired. Her name? Only whispered now, like a myth parents used to scare unruly children. Don't cross the fence, or the clipboard queen might return. But what surprised me most was what the fence became. It started small. A neighbor painted a tiny flower on one of the posts. A teenager filmed a TikTok dance titled, "Respect the Fence." Someone pinned a laminated copy of the viral news story beside the gate, and then it snowballed. A retired woodworker carved a wooden sign, "The Wall That Stood." Kids drew chalk arrows on the sidewalk leading to it like it was a landmark. A local artist painted a mural, goats in sunglasses, koi leaping, a proud fence under a golden sky. It was funny, absurd, beautiful. This simple structure of wood and wire had transformed into something bigger, a symbol of standing your ground, of holding the line against absurdity, of saying, no, enough. The new HOA board, sane, kind, human, officially declared the area an HOA-free cultural landmark. They even gave it a plaque, the Karen line, never to be crossed again. We held a quiet celebration, not a festival, not a barbecue, just neighbors, gathered in the evening light. There was lemonade, laughter. One kid wore a goat costume and gave out fence guardian badges. No speeches, no drama, just peace. At one point, I caught myself smiling, really smiling, because for the first time, I wasn't bracing for the next ridiculous accusation. I wasn't tightening bolts or scanning security footage. I was just breathing, living. The goat, our accidental mascot, even posed for selfies. A little girl knelt beside him and whispered, "You're the hero of the whole street." He bleated softly, like he knew. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, I stood by the fence, hand on the post, and I realized something. This wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the beginning of something better. A community reborn. A neighborhood no longer afraid of clipboards or anonymous flyers. And a man, once just a farmer, now the keeper of a legend. I took one last look across the yard, the house, the pond, and said quietly, just for me, we built something stronger than wood here. We built a line no one will ever cross again. Epilogue. One fence, 1,000 stories. Sometimes, the smallest lines we draw become the ones that change everything. It started as a few wooden posts, driven into the dirt by tired hands, on a piece of farmland no one thought twice about. But it became a wall, not to divide, but to define. It defined peace. It defined sanity. It defined where HOA Karen ended, and I began. The battles? They were real, petty, exhausting, funny, in a way that only makes sense after the storm has passed. But through every flyer, every drone, every ridiculous accusation, that fence stood. And because it stood, so did I. The neighbors who once watched from behind closed curtains, now they wave when they pass. Now they help me plant. Now they ask me how Max the goat is doing, like he's royalty. Sometimes a kid will walk up to the fence, look at the mural, and ask, "Is that really what happened?" And I'll smile and just say, almost. Because stories, the real kind, aren't told in courtrooms or newsletters. They live in the little things, in the grooves of a weathered fence post, in the brush strokes of a goat wearing sunglasses, in the lemonade handed over a gate that once felt like a fortress. Karen is gone now. Her house sold, her clipboard rusting in a box somewhere. But her legacy? It wasn't power. It wasn't fear. It was a reminder that no matter how loud absurdity becomes, truth doesn't need to shout. It just stands. So, if you ever find yourself being pushed, bullied, gaslit by someone holding a clipboard and a fake sense of power, remember this. Stand your ground. Plant your posts. Build your fence. And let the goats do the rest. Because peace isn't handed to you. You build it, board by board, story by story. And sometimes, it looks just like a carrot field surrounded by a line no one dares to cross. To peace, to patience, and to every quiet hero who chose to stand, when it would have been easier to sit. The fence wasn't just built to keep things out. It was built to remind us what matters inside.